take some speaker's privilege also to do a couple things, right? The first is to put this up, which I didn't put up, which is a timeline if people want to ask about this, since this is a teach-in, right? Because we did a lot, there's so much to cover, and so just want to put this up as a point of reference, right? That there has been a deliberate attempt to remove Gaza from the broader context and to make it the idea, to remove it from the Palestinian question since the beginning of honestly the Oslo peace process. That's not irony. That's the point, right? It's been the point to separate Gaza altogether. It's not as desirable as the West Bank, which was meant to be preserved, which is we see in the form of now de facto and de jure annexation, where the idea was to remove Gaza altogether, and now the idea is to remove the Palestinians and keep Gaza still, right? So this becomes relevant. The second thing I just want to clarify and echo on Dylan's critical intervention of how we understand IRA, and to clarify, you know, thank you Dylan so much, that the definition that the critique of that definition is primarily in the guiding principles that have enumerated 7 out of the 8 ways to recognize that hate towards Jewish people in the critique of Israel and in the critique of Zionism, which would basically mean that my very existence as a Palestinian, which challenges the uninterrupted temporal and spatial sovereign Zionist sovereignty, right? That I, according just my being here, my telling you I'm Palestinian, I'm already in violation of IRA, right? And so that's what. But it's in that enumeration where you see it very, very clearly, very unequivocally, and I want to emphasize that.
I also want to clarify that IRA has not been adopted by Rutgers University.
Good.
Good.
Go Rutgers.
Good.
Go Rutgers.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions. I hope we can get through them all. The first one is, I think, actually really critical here. Where do you get your news?
That's a good one.
I see this all the time in my classes. This is a question students constantly have. And it is, first of all, a generational difference in how news is consumed and where it comes from. And it's also because we're in a propaganda war. That's the sort of mainstream media right now. So where do we get our news?
CNN. In this moment,
Final answer.
I'll just start by saying I get it from a number of sources. Al Jazeera has been really not reliable on everything, but really reliable. No news source. I mean, all news sources we should take with a grain of salt. But I have been following Al Jazeera closely. They've been doing live updates. I've also very much been receiving my news from people on the ground. Those who are still with us, who begin their commentary on social media by saying, I'm still alive today, so I'm going to tell you what happened to me, right? Mu'taz Aziza, a photographer, has been a great source. Yara Eid, who left Gaza but is in the UK right now, but who 32 members of her family have been killed. Jihad Abu Salim, Isam Adwan, friends like Hussam al-Khulaq, other sources like We Are Not Numbers. This is a group of young Gazan Palestinian writers in Gaza who have been organizing to write and to get published so that you hear their stories, who literally call themselves We Are Not Numbers, with zero irony, right? Zero irony. So that's where I've been getting a lot of my news from.
I also want to say that news is different depending on the language you speak.
100%.
I follow news in Arabic, and I do that for many reasons, but one primarily is who actually has people in Gaza, who actually has journalists in Gaza. Oftentimes, if you watch something like CNN, you know, someone will be like standing on top of a skyscraper or something in Tel Aviv, and they're saying, you know, over there, see that, that's Gaza. That's what's happening. And my undergraduate degree is in media. So these are all frames of, they're not accidental frames. So if you do speak other languages, lean on those languages.
What about you, Al?
Black Agenda Report, I'll add. Black Agenda Report's good, I think, for me in various ways, but I think Black Agenda Report's page makes me think about how this thing we're calling news, which is really just, let's call it information, let's call it knowledge, let's call it sharing. That it actually, to me, what they do all the time is they enact solidarity through the kind of circulation of knowledge in an autonomous format, right? So Black Agenda Report's a kind of autonomous media project that the late great Glenn Ford started. By the way, you know, Glenn Ford was thinking about Palestine long before many folks in the kind of Black radical community, in the current Black radical community, were talking, thinking about it. So Glenn Ford stuff was prescient and remains prescient around this, no different than June Jordan, as a lot of you know, who talked about the question of Palestine, you know, 30 years ago as a central question. Another one, too, I want to prop up are all the other various autonomous media forms, including podcasting projects. Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. I mean, we could go on and on with different podcasting projects, many of which are now at this point producing podcast episodes in real time. So folks are generating stuff within 24 hours of things happening. I think that I rely on, my real answer to the question as well is that I rely on my networks of comrades to share those things out. So I think if we're embedded in community of people who are interested in knowledge circulation, that we catch this stuff all the time. And that stuff is a really refreshing perspective, not only because it brings kind of facts and evidence and archive to us, but the analysis. Right? When you pay attention to a long-form conversation with people, you help build an analysis. So it's not just factual, you know, circulation.
I just want to add too that, you know, we do also get our news from CNN, all the mainstream networks, because we have to. We have to know what they are saying. Yeah. And so it is in this moment that, you know, there are many things I'm not grateful about for being an academic, but I am grateful that I have had the training and the, you know, to read, to learn how to be critical. And this is for those of you who are students, you know, reading Covering Islam, understanding the history of how these images have been framed over and over again is absolutely vital. And we do have to understand what's being said in order to seek out, right, those voices on the ground and to hear them. And I'll just give a small shout out. I have 2 teenagers, you know, at home right now. You know, shout out to TikTok a little bit, you know, because thank goodness for some of these voices and young creators who are creating these videos so honest, so pure, and really circulating tens of thousands of views, right, pointing people. I mean, this is a voice that, you know, we need right now. You know, it's a cesspool in lots of ways too. There's lots of different, but, you know, it's there, and this is the world we live in. So I think we all consume media in this really myriad kind of set of ways, and that critical lens is vital to all of it. So.
Okay, we have a bunch of, we have a great, wonderful, a huge amount of really wonderful questions. Thank you. You know, some of them I want you, everyone here and on the live stream to know, this conversation doesn't end here.
Right.
We are here, you know, we are here together. And, you know, like there was a question on readings, like what foundational readings would you recommend for people who don't know? You know, Noura and I will put together a syllabus, but I would start with Professor Erakat's book, to make a plug here.
There are enough. If you're interested in the aftermath of the 2014 onslaught. So let me show you one more thing.
Yes, do it.
So,
I'm happy to stay a little.
Check this out. The against Gaza begin in 2004. All right? And they begin in the moment that Ariel Sharon basically says, let's disengage from Gaza by removing 8,000 settlers and the military infrastructure, and writes this explicitly in a letter with George Bush, president at the time, who says, we'll remove our settlers and settler infrastructure in exchange for allowing us to basically continue the settlement project in the West Bank, which is more desirable, right? In that moment of removal, this is called the disengagement plan, Israel declared that it ended its occupation of the Gaza Strip, except ending occupation in international law means who exercises effective control. Israel continued to exercise effective control. It maintains the airspace, it maintains the population registry, it maintains the water under the ground, it maintains all 4 of the 5 points of ingress and egress, it maintains control over what people eat, even how much they eat at times. It maintains the perimeter, even the maritime borders, between 3 and 6 nautical miles, where people can even swim and fish, right? Israel remains in effective control. It's also been recognized by an ICC decision on the Comoros decision that was thinking about the commandeering of the Turkish flotilla that tried to break the siege. So you see it there as opinion. What has Israel told us? That they don't occupy Gaza, but that Gaza is also not independent. What does that mean? If you're not an occupying power, right? And an occupation is legal if it's temporary, where the occupying power usurps the police power of the local population and its ability to govern itself in order to return to a status quo ante, right? So it's not occupying it despite the effective control at the same time that Gaza is not part of an independent Palestine. They created a new name for it and they called it a hostile entity. This happens in 2000 and at the time of disengagement in 2005. Why call it a hostile entity? Because now you put it in a legally in a legal black zone, right? Where you create a framework of sui generis, where unique unto itself. There is no precedent and there is no analogy that can be applied. You have to create new law where none exists, because there is a significant body of law that regulates occupation, that regulates colonization, that regulates guerrilla fighting, that regulates who is a combatant, who is a non-combatant, who is a civilian. And Israel forwarded that none of that is relevant because this is unlike anything else. It's a hostile entity. When in fact we should understand it as an international armed conflict, right? That is regulated by these bodies of law. Since then, in that language of legal legal black zone, Israel has attempted to, as I showed you, expand the northern and southern buffer zones to further concentrate Palestinians into the Gaza Strip, right? And these are all of the military operations that have taken place. The ones that we've seen take place with advanced weapons technology, right? The most advanced weapon technology begin in 2008. We see that in 2008, 2009. You see it again in 2012, 2014, these are the biggest ones, 2021, and now 2023. In 2014, many of us were given platforms because that was the third large-scale offensive. People started to ask, wait a minute, if you can't defeat if you can't defeat the problem militarily, either through advanced weapons technology, 51 days of pummeling the Gaza Strip, a death toll of over 2,000, leaving over 300,000 children in need of psychosocial care, psychological and social care, and a siege, and a naval blockade, and sanctions. What's the solution here? So in that time, we saw people start to ask questions. In that moment, I worked with a group of people as part of the Arab Studies Institute, of which Maya is a member. We created a pedagogical resource called Gaza in Context. That includes a 20-minute film. That includes teaching guides, how to teach each parts of those films, and that includes a bibliography of 110 entries. So for folks, this is the long way of answering. We've been trying to tell you what to read. And those 110 entries, not for nothing, are all specifically about Gaza. So that doesn't even tell you about all of the literature on Palestine. What we see right now in 2023 is all of that being swept aside to say that none of that knowledge matters. None of that knowledge matters, except what the pushback that we're given is, it has to matter. Because genocide is not a final solution. It never was, it never will be, never again means never again for everybody.
These are all grouped together. Oh, I grouped mine.
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Do you want me, I can just, I kind of group these four together so,
Okay,
so
yeah.
that we can
Go
get to
ahead.
everything. So I'm just gonna read them. These are specifically about,
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, I'll just read them. So the first question here is there a distinct role of women as women in the struggle for liberation? What can be done here at Rutgers to demand a free Palestine? What are Rutgers' investments in Israel? That's a great question, to borrow Dylan's favorite curse word. And how do we as young Muslim students build a place for Islam and I think struggles and ideas like this in this country? And I'll just be very brief. I'll go back to what I said in my remarks. We have learned, right? All of us, not just Muslims, everybody. You know, accommodation does not work. And I don't mean that in a way that we are not, you know, present and good to our neighbors and kind and, you know, care and have a culture of care. That's not what I mean at all. But depending upon institutions to create spaces to you, asking them to let you in, this is not going to work. So for you young students, start to look beyond, look beyond the institutions for where you want to build. Look to organizers like these here right now who have built institutions as the ones you want to collaborate with, right? You need to make your own space. I mean, this was movements of liberation, third world liberation, ethnic studies, the Nation of Islam. These types of groups were saying this, right? We have to have our own spaces, right? So I mean, that's just a very simple answer, but stop looking to these institutions and this nonprofit industrial complex and all of these things to, you know, take you into account. It doesn't work. So that's just the really short answer. In terms of the distinct role of women as in the struggle for liberation, I want everyone to kind of talk about that. Thinking about the ways in which the question of womanhood and women's rights is also weaponized in this conference. Oh, well, how do they treat their women? Women are, this is the colonial discourse of the veil. All of these things are also things that we have read. Leila Ahmed, Homa Hutfar, all of these writers, right, have already accounted for this, how this language of women's rights, while we absolutely support gender justice and women's rights, this second wave feminist discourse that we are all mired in, that is the language of the state, is not what we need to aspire for. So as women, as LGBTQ communities, as, you know, all of these communities as well, we need to absolutely push back against that weaponization, right, of women's rights in these discourses. And I'll just say that and let you all kind of build upon that, because it absolutely is being used against you know, those who are fighting for liberation for all in this moment.
I'll make two quick comments in response to this set of questions. One is the Rutgers.
Oh, the Rutgers students, yeah.
So Rutgers, I think this is for Rutgers and any university. I think to identify the role of a particular university or college for that matter in supporting this genocidal project that Israel's undertaking, I think we have to have an analysis of how it is that university and college administrations are police power. The police don't simply, you know, answer to the administration. If you actually do a power mapping of how the bureaucracy of administrations in colleges and universities work, usually the police department chiefs report to some version of a university president, or in the University of California they call them chancellors. So I've been saying for the last 3 years, at the University of California, the chancellor, and maybe at Rutgers the president, is the chief of police. Right? So it's not an analogy, it's not an abstraction, it's not a metaphor. The administration in these places is actually police power. It's the highest level of police power. If we analyze, what's up, Martin? If we analyze it that way and name it that way, I think it actually changes the way we do things and the way we treat them. Right? So in other words, when you get that friendly phone call from your administrative staff or administrative person, now you kind of know, treat them as a cop. Right? And I say this with all due respect to my friends, colleagues, loved ones who are serving as part of the university administrations. My dad just died 3 weeks ago. He was a president of the university. So I'm saying this, I appreciate that. But I'm saying this like with that in my heart. Like, I still love you, but I'm going to treat you like a cop. Right? In certain moments, I'll treat you like, okay, the second thing, this thing about the so-called role of women. So I think we need to just sharpen, you know, a kind of a feminist, and for that matter, a queer and trans analysis, the way that I've seen many comrades and leaders do it within the global abolitionist struggle. Right? The kind of transformation and shifts and interventions and disruptions of how people are thinking about abolition in different places around the world is in many ways led by the kind of courageous political and theoretical and pragmatic and organizing insights of feminist, radical feminist and abolitionist women, queer and trans abolitionists and so forth. But I will also say that the thing that I always come back to when we think about the particularity of what women have done within revolutionary struggles is to immediately point at the long histories of women directly participating in and leading armed insurrection, armed revolutionary struggle, armed self-defense, and the construction of infrastructures of community and thriving around those things.
I just want, quick thing, this question. What can be done here at Rutgers to demand a free Palestine? Okay, so we absolutely need to protest. We absolutely need to support those things. But these faculty right here, you need to take their classes. You need to fill the rooms. You need to demand more classes. You need to tell the departments you're in that you want a class on Palestine. You want to read these texts. We need, I mean, we need enrollments. We need you in our classrooms. We need your parents to call and say, we want these classes for our students. Because, I'm so sorry, there are parents for other students who are offended by our classes, and they're calling the administration. I'm hearing about this. So your parents can call and say, I want my kid to have this class. I don't want them to not learn about their history. Demand it, right? And this is part of how universities work, right? You're paying tuition. You're customers. Right? So just remember that. And that is also part of the support. You know, I mean, maybe it looks like a certain way, but in our departments, in the administration, many of us are not supported. Many of us are the lone person in our department that says these things. There is hostility directed at us for saying these things. So we need you just as much as, you know, you might want to need us, right? So I just want to say that.
I just want to chime in here on the question of colonial feminism. We know it. It's a very old genealogy. Colonial feminism is part of a centuries-long global colonial project. We should know when to refuse it. It's, you know, women deserve the right to be unoccupied. Queer people deserve the right to be unoccupied. They deserve the right not to be bombed. They deserve the right to self-determination. That is what anchors my feminist politics. And, you know, what also anchors here is that I refuse to let our men be turned into legitimate targets. I refuse to not mourn all the babas and the uncles that we see running into buildings, picking people up, taking them to hospitals on their backs because there is no fuel, no cars, no roads. That is part of my feminism.
Yeah, I want to just a couple of notes on this, and I've heard this before. I've had this question since I started speaking maybe 20-some years ago, where people were like, but you're a woman. What would Hamas do to you if you went? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Let me respond in just the quickest way possible, okay? When those bombs fall, they don't diverge when they see women. And they don't make a U-turn if they see somebody queer. Okay? That is indiscriminate bombing. And the other thing, the most ethical form of solidarity is to listen to those who have been telling us what they need to get free. Palestinians do not want you to save them. Palestinians want to save themselves. Queer Palestinians, our siblings, want to save themselves. Palestinian women want to save themselves. We will help them do that by removing ourselves as part of the problem. Right? In medicine, the first thing that a doctor learns is do no harm. If you can't help, just do no harm. And right now, the United States and all of us as taxpayers and Rutgers as an institution is doing a tremendous amount of harm. The way that we end that harm is to, you know, what are students to do? How is Rutgers actually supporting weapons manufacturing? How is Rutgers normalizing the captivity and the hostage taking of our corpses that are being held at Tel Aviv University, including my cousin, right? What is the memorandum of understanding that Rutgers has with Tel Aviv University that makes that possible and makes it normal, right? How can we just do no harm here? How are we developing the weapons technology that's making this happen, right? And so in that ethical solidarity, it's basically stop being part of the problem in order to allow those that we care about, you know, to be part of their own liberation and to map it out. And trust me, Palestinian women have a lot to say about patriarchy, as do all women. As do all women. And then this idea of what has been the role, I mean, frankly, it's not the role that's being lifted up, but it's the role that, how else do you think we've survived as a people? How did we get through the Nakba? We got it through care. We got it through song. We got it through steadfastness. We got it through taking care of one another. We got it through continuing to teach our children even when our schools did not exist. We got it through creating homes even when their homes were bombed. All of that has been the work of women. We have survived because women are the backbone of who we are as a people. And so just to emphasize, this is what it means to be engaged in a feminist practice as well, to be able to recognize resistance as more than merely the idea of just battling, but it's also the idea of how it is that we have engaged in sumud, steadfastness.
We're actually at time, but we're going to go for 10 more minutes, if that's okay. I want to there are two questions that I want to for sure address. One is linked to actually what we were talking about, the category of the civilian. How do we think about this category and its operations and its constructions in relation to Palestine and Israel, but also in relation to the project of settler colonialism more generally. And this one here, thoughts on the Hawley, is that how you say it?
Senator
Hawley resolution that was passed yesterday and the impact this will have on SJPs. Where do we go from here? Well, one of the senators who voted for it is across the street right now, Bernie Sanders.
He left.
He left?
Yeah, I yelled at him twice. He left. He did not even want to look at me. He ignored me.
Well, he was here, and then you shouted him away.
He did. And I was there the whole time, and then I couldn't find a moment to interrupt, so I followed him out. I said, "Can I talk to him?" And they said, "No." So I yelled at him, then he walked away from me, and then I found him at his car, I yelled at him again, he walked away from me again. There was no one else.
Tell them what it is. Okay. So this is a resolution, I think it was passed yesterday, that offers a full-throated support for Israel's war on Hamas, and it also condemns, right? That's the language. Condemns all, and they say anti-Semitism is rising on campus, and they are using the IRA definition here because. Although it is true there are, anti-Semitic incidents we need to take very fucking seriously, and actually we can talk about that too because there have been some in the country. And they condemn specifically SJP as engaging and amplifying sort of anti-Semitic environment on campus. What I think we do, this is the time, faculty, administrators, everybody, just put your body on the line. These are our students. They are being called by the U.S. House, by the Congress. So to me, that's what we do. We take over. What do you do? Whatever we have to do to actually insist on what we do. What it is that we do. This is a university. If we're not going to be able to protect our students, what's the point?
Why don't you go first, and then I have a lot to say.
I'll just say something real quick in relation to what you just said, Mara. they're gonna come and start taking SJP students. That's what's on the immediate horizon. So let's just not be surprised when that happens, not act shocked. I think we actually need to prepare for that now, and possibly preempt it. I know that it's very different. I mean, I know there's people watching live stream, they'll watch this recording later. So every campus, every institutional site is different. So let's appreciate that. The condition of each SJP or analogous organizations is different. I was at Dartmouth last week, and their Palestinian student organization, it's not called SJP, but it was very obvious to me that the conditions at Dartmouth are very different than the conditions at UC Riverside. So I appreciate that, I honor that, but I also think that the preparation for the inevitable kind of police kidnappings that are gonna start happening as a result of these policies that have been supported by your most progressive Democrat. For those of y'all that love Democrats and vote Democrat, that's your guy. Bernie's your guy. Hey, I'm in organizations that like supported Bernie's runs. I've never supported Bernie Sanders. I've never supported. I'm against the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party is the leading edge of counterinsurgency in the United States in many ways. Of course, they're not exclusively, you know, the counterinsurgency, but it's to say that this kind of mass legislative, you know, affirmation of the effective domestic and global criminalization of Palestinian students in particular is really deep, and they know that SJP is one of the most important pedagogical, cultural, political, and organizing hubs of this work right now. So make no mistake that that is on the immediate horizon. So it's time to prepare for that immediately and preempt it.
I'm gonna, so this has also been very, very difficult, and part of the, you know, just as somebody who did even call, you know, who did, I'm gonna just own it, like Bernie Sanders also provided Rashida Tlaib with a room when Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy shut down our event in the Visitor Center on Nakba, commemoration and education. And so this is a historic ally who does recognize the Nakba. Bernie encapsulates an anxiety amongst a lot of even, I don't think he's anti-Zionist, but even anti-Zionist Jews. An anxiety amongst them who feel like the left and progressives and the radicals, for sure, have expressed no empathy for Israeli suffering, right? And so they feel caught in a way that they want to be in support but don't know how they can be in support without also, does that extinguish their empathy? The problem here is that our empathy has been extinguished preemptively. Before we were able to even come to the front, immediately empathy became the, you know, grief, even with Israeli families, right? Became weaponized as justification for unfettered force, right? And so we too are in a position where this weapon, our maneuver has been, even space for the full breadth of our humanity has been limited. There was a wonderful article that also described this as the prefiguration of grief with Israel. Like Israel, even in its, you know, in its establishment, prefigures grief, right, and victimhood, and extinguishes the possibility of grief for Palestinians. So it's, how do we get past that? Well, the first thing that I say is, regardless of empathy and grief, there's a principled position against genocide, period. Period. That actually becomes the precondition to anything else we're going to discuss, right? Because then what ends up happening, and what then these progressive, you know, even what's being asked of these progressive left spaces is to create a false moral equivocation between the demand to end genocide, right, and between the space of empathy and collective suffering. So help us create that space, and that doesn't happen by attacking our students who are grieving, who are surveilled, who are securitized, who are denied support, right, at the top levels, who are policed. And so I want to echo Maya in saying we have to protect our students, we have to protect one another, and echo Sylvia in saying, you know, there isn't even room here to study. I am a Palestine studies scholar amongst the things that I study. I've never taught a class on Palestine.
Imagine.
Not once.
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, not in Virginia, not in DC, nowhere. I have never taught a class on Palestine, right? Which is part of, you know, that's also part of the epistemic violence that I think Dylan was pointing out to. Yeah.
And New Jersey being one of the largest populations, not of Palestinians, but also of Muslims in the country per capita. 3% population in New Jersey is Muslim. National average is like 1.8. So, I mean, why? Yeah.
We have the strongest zionist population in this
That too. There's that too. Yeah.
But just on the politics of grief as well, I mean, just know that the Senate that passed this resolution also took, you know, 6 days to say anything about a slain Palestinian child, Badir al-Fayoumi, 6 years old, who was stabbed 26 times. I mean, even in this explicit form, President Biden didn't call the family for several days, right? That they've had visuals that have also not only backed this, you know, occluded this genocidal campaign, but expressed sympathy in ways that have left, the only expression of sympathy that's left has been in these guerrilla tactics that we've used, right? We're taking to the streets, we've created our own media, we have teach-ins, da-da-da-da-da. And then to be taxed for not having empathy. It's a bit ironic. It's a bit ironic, yeah.
I just want to speak briefly for myself on the question of the category of the civilian. The category of the civilian or the combatant, non-combatant is very important to me. I lived through the 1982 invasion, siege, and bombing of Beirut. That category was denied. You know, to myself and everybody that I love. As an indigenous person in the United States, the category of the civilian is what has been denied. And Palestinians have been fighting for 100 years, 100 years, to be recognized, to be entered into that category, which is so connected to the category of the human, which is what Professor Sylvia was saying. Professor Sylvia. Professor Sylvia.
I like that.
Victoria Sylvia.
And my sort of, you know, I want to be better. I'm better. I am better. My struggles are better.
All right. Do we want to wrap it up? Do you want to wrap it up? Are we good?
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
okay.
gonna wrap it up. Okay. Are we good? Ending here? There's so much. There's so much. Again, we are here. This conversation does not end. This is a beginning of many. We have made this beginning so many times. This is one more beginning. But this time, we should all in this room vow that it's not going to begin again, and this is not the end, and this is not an episode.
Yeah.
And for those who want to continue learning, ASI is doing a weekly teach-in.
All right. That we are also.
That we are part of. Yesterday was the second installment on history, specifically Palestine and Gaza. In a couple of weeks, it'll be on law. And so all the stuff that we didn't share here, we can share. That also includes colonialism, civilian warfare, da-da-da-da-da. And then future weeks will include different installments. So know that there are a tremendous amount of resources in this moment that we should share and disseminate. And protect one another, above all.
Can I tell people to come
Yeah.
to the workshop
Yes.
after? Oh, so just final thing, like we keep on saying, final.
Final thing.
And then Maya will have the final thing. Starting at 2 p.m. today, we are this room. We are continuing to have a conversation about liberation in the university. There's a workshop that this helped co-sponsor this teach-in, the Sawyer seminar. It's the Afterlives of Liberation, Anti-Racist Praxis for the 21st Century. We're going to have 2 panels talking about that in the larger academy and here at Rutgers. Dylan is coming back, Maya's coming back, Noura is one of my co-PIs. So come back at 2, come back right here. Let's keep this conversation going.
There's an event.
We are not done. Go ahead.
We have an event on the 30th. Monday.
Oh, right.
With one of somebody who has been really formative to the feminist, to creating and being an activist, writer, professor. on Palestine and feminism, and is one of the primary authors of the very simple statement, Palestine is a feminist issue, period. She will be here on Monday discussing her new book. Please show up. Look out for the flyer. Her new book is called Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts. Nada Ili.
Say her name.
Say her name. Nada Ilya.
Yeah, she's the best.
Okay? Like, this is how, when it's not an episode, show up. Show up for our
We'll put it
Palestinian
on the
fighters.
Sawyer Afterlives website for all the information. So Sawyer Seminar Afterlives will have all the information for the event. It will all be there, and you can come back there. Inshallah, the video will be posted of this teach-in if you want to share later on, and it's going to be there. So Sawyer Seminar Afterlives, video, events, keep an eye out. All right, Maya, last word? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.